Echoes in the jungle. In the lush, dense jungles of Mesoamerica, where howler monkeys cry from emerald canopies and vines twist around ancient stones, lie the silent remnants of one of humanity's most astonishing civilizations, the Maya. Towering pyramids pierce through the forest roof like green-clad sentinels, their stone faces worn smooth by centuries of rain and sun. Hidden beneath tangled roots and moss lie ball courts, ceremonial plazas, and palaces that once echoed with chants, drumming, and the steady rhythm of stone tools carving glyphs into limestone walls. The Maya world is a place of misty mornings and bright midday suns, where the land itself seems to whisper secrets of a people whose time once stretched like an unbroken calendar from horizon to horizon. Centuries before Europeans set foot on these shores, the Maya built cities that rivaled those of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Their monumental architecture, stepped pyramids rising hundreds of feet above forest floors, served as both temples to their gods and observatories to track the movement of planets, stars, and seasons. The Maya were among the greatest sky watchers in human history, charting the cycles of Venus, calculating solar eclipses with startling precision, and weaving these cosmic rhythms into every aspect of their lives. Kings were crowned according to celestial alignments. Wars were launched under auspicious conjunctions. Harvests were planned by watching the path of the sun across their stone-carved horizons. And yet, for centuries, their story was shrouded in mystery. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they encountered the last flickering embers of the once thriving Maya world. Many of their cities lay abandoned, swallowed by jungle. The Spaniards saw towering ruins and intricate glyphs but could not read the stories etched upon them. They called the pyramids and temples the work of an unknowable people, lost to time, their knowledge reduced to myth and legend. For generations, scholars debated whether the Maya were peaceful astronomers who simply faded away, or powerful kingdoms, brought low by famine, drought, or internecine war. But behind the quiet facades of crumbling temples and the fallen stelae covered in vines lay a far richer story, one of brilliance and tragedy, of human resilience and cosmic wonder. Recent decades have brought breakthroughs in the decipherment of Maya writing, revealing a civilization as politically dynamic and artistically sophisticated as any on Earth. The glyphs tell of kings and queens who ruled over city-states that traded, warred, allied, and betrayed. They speak of gods and ancestors who demanded blood offerings to keep the world turning, of mathematicians who conceived of zero centuries before it reached Europe, and of builders who transformed swamps into thriving cities with raised causeways and monumental plazas. The story of the Maya is not merely one of rise and collapse, but of continuity and survival. Millions of Maya people still live in the rainforests, mountains, and valleys of Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. They continue to speak their ancestral languages, grow maize and beans on terraced hillsides, and perform ceremonies honoring the sun, moon, and sacred earth. In their weaving, their festivals, and their quiet prayers, whispered to the spirits of mountains and forests, the heartbeat of their ancient civilization continues. This journey into the world of the Maya is a journey through time itself, from the first human footprints pressed into the soils of Mesoamerica thousands of years ago to the dawn of kings and cities rising in the humid lowlands, from the brilliant flowering of classic Maya civilization in stone and glyph, to the dramatic collapse that left great cities empty and the forest to reclaim their grandeur, from the first Spanish incursions, with gunpowder and steel, to centuries of resistance and the quiet survival of a people whose spirit could not be conquered. As we trace the path of the Maya through triumph and tragedy, discovery and rediscovery, we also hear the echoes that remain in the jungle today. The rustle of leaves against pyramid walls, the call of the toucan at dawn, the distant song of a weaver recounting the lineage of her ancestors, in the stones, in the stars, and in the hearts of their descendants, the Maya endure, a reminder of the ingenuity, courage, and enduring mystery of a people who gazed skyward and built a civilization in dialogue with the cosmos itself. Origins: from hunters to builders. Thousands of years ago, long before the rise of pyramids and palaces, the lands of Mesoamerica were home to small bands of hunter-gatherers who moved with the rhythms of the seasons. These early peoples roamed forests and grasslands in search of game, wild fruits, and edible roots, leaving behind stone tools and the faint traces of campsites near riverbanks and caves. Archaeologists have uncovered spear points and scrapers dating back over 10,000 years, evidence of a way of life shaped by survival, curiosity, and the slow expansion of human communities across the continent. As the climate warmed after the last ice age, the lush jungles and rolling highlands of what would become the Maya world offered a rich tapestry of resources. The forests teemed with deer, peccary, and small game. Rivers brimmed with fish and freshwater turtles. Yet life remained precarious, subject to sudden storms, shifting animal migrations, and the ever-present threat of hunger. Slowly, across generations, these early communities began experimenting with the plants that surrounded them. They discovered that certain wild grasses, when tended and replanted, offered dependable harvests. They learned to cultivate gourds and beans, to select seeds that produce stronger, more fruitful plants. In the humid valleys and along the forest edges, they began to plant maize, the tall green stalks that would one day become the foundation of an entire civilization. This shift from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled farming did not happen overnight. It unfolded over centuries, as families built small thatched huts near fertile clearings and returned season after season to tend their growing fields. Maize became a staple, joined by beans that fixed nitrogen in the soil and squash that sprawled across the ground, shading out weeds. This combination, known as the Three Sisters, provided a balanced diet rich in carbohydrates, protein, and essential nutrients. Farming allowed villages to grow larger, more stable, and more connected. People no longer needed to move constantly in search of food, and with that stability came the seeds of culture, tradition, and collective memory. By around 2000 BCE, These early agricultural communities had begun to establish the first true villages in the region. Small clusters of homes surrounded by fields of maize and squash, dotted river valleys and upland clearings. The people continued to hunt and fish, supplementing their diets with wild game, but more and more they relied on the rhythms of planting and harvest, of rain and sun, to guide their daily lives. The cycles of the seasons became deeply woven into their worldview, and elders watched the stars and phases of the moon to determine the best times to sow and reap. Pottery began to appear in these early villages, simple clay vessels hardened in open fires. These pots allowed families to store surplus maize and beans, to cook stews that could feed large gatherings, and to carry water from nearby springs. With pottery came new forms of artistic expression, painted designs, incised patterns and shapes that reflected communal beliefs and the emerging roles of leaders, shamans and craftspeople. Tools made of ground stone became more sophisticated, polished axes for clearing land, grinding stones for turning maize into flour, and delicate blades for working hides and bone. Trade networks, too, began to take shape. Villages exchanged obsidian blades, shells, pigments, and exotic stones, weaving the first threads of a regional economy. Small ceremonial spaces emerged within villages, simple cleared plazas or stone altars, where people gathered to mark the turning of the seasons, to honor ancestors, or to seek the favor of unseen spirits believed to inhabit the forests and mountains. In these quiet beginnings lay the roots of the Maya civilization. The journey from scattered bands of hunters to builders of enduring settlements was not marked by conquest or sudden leaps, but by patient learning and adaptation. It was the story of families tending fields year after year, of mothers teaching daughters to weave baskets, of fathers showing sons how to plant maize in neat rows aligned with the rising sun. Over generations, this patient transformation created the foundation for the monumental cities and dazzling achievements that would one day define the ancient Maya. In the centuries between 2000 and 1000 BCE, the small farming villages of Mesoamerica began to transform into something more enduring and complex. Where once simple clusters of huts stood, communities now developed larger gathering spaces, rudimentary plazas, and earthen platforms that served as the earliest ceremonial centers. In these places, people assembled not just to share food or labor, but to participate in communal rituals that honored the forces of rain, sun, and fertile earth. These gatherings laid the groundwork for the social and religious structures that would one day become the heart of Maya civilization. Archaeologists have uncovered traces of these early centers at sites like Nakbe and Cuello, where raised platforms and carefully arranged post holes hint at wooden buildings that may have served as communal meeting halls or shrines. Here, villagers came together to celebrate planting and harvest, to mourn the passing of elders, or to mark the cycles of the stars. In the damp lowlands and fertile upland valleys, pottery shards lie scattered across ancient middens, the broken remnants of communal feasts and everyday meals that sustained a growing population. The development of pottery marks one of the key turning points in this era. Before fired clay vessels, People carried water and stored grain in woven baskets or hollowed gourds, which were fragile and prone to decay. Pottery allowed communities to store surplus maize safely, protect seeds from pests, and cook stews that could feed large gatherings. Early designs were simple. Thick-walled bowls and jars hardened in open fires, decorated with incised lines or burnished with smooth stones. Over time, artisans refined their techniques, producing thinner, more durable vessels with painted motifs that hinted at emerging cultural identities. Pottery was not merely utilitarian. It became an early canvas for expression, with symbols that may have signified family lineages, spiritual beliefs, or ties to regional traditions. Some vessels bore stylized animal figures, jaguars, birds, or serpents, while others displayed geometric patterns echoing the rhythms of planted fields and the cycles of rain and sun. These designs were often passed down through families, connecting generations in shared knowledge of clay, fire, and pigment. Stone tools, too, advanced in sophistication during this period. Villagers crafted polished axes for clearing new fields, chisels for woodworking, and grinding stones for processing maize into flour. Obsidian, prized for its razor-sharp edges, became an important trade commodity, carried across distances from highland volcanic sources to lowland farming communities. Archaeologists have traced these obsidian flows through chemical analysis, revealing a network of exchange that stretched hundreds of miles, linking scattered villages into a fragile but growing web of contact. Trade networks were not limited to stone. Coastal communities gathered shells, which were shaped into beads and pendants, and carried inland along forest trails. Highland communities offered salt, obsidian, and finely worked jade, while lowland villagers traded cacao, feathers, and woven textiles. This movement of goods also carried ideas, rituals, and stories, binding distant communities into a shared cultural sphere that would one day blossom into the monumental Maya cities we know, from towering pyramids and carved stelae. In these early centuries, the seeds of hierarchy began to sprout. Some families, through control of trade routes, skilled craft production, or religious authority, accumulated greater influence within their villages. Leaders emerged, elders who mediated disputes, organized labor for communal projects, and presided over seasonal festivals. Yet society remained largely egalitarian, with extended families working fields together, sharing surplus harvests, and cooperating in the construction of communal structures. Across the Maya world, from the swamps of the lowlands to the ridges of the highlands, these first ceremonial centers and village societies laid the foundation for what would come next. The pottery fired in smoky kilns, the obsidian blades exchanged along narrow trails, and the earthen platforms rising from jungle clearings were more than simple artifacts. They were the beginnings of cities, kingdoms, and dynasties. They were the quiet birth of a civilization that in time would raise stone towers to the heavens and chart the movement of planets with uncanny precision. This period, often overlooked in favor of later monumental grandeur, was the slow dawn of Maya history. Here in the humble gathering spaces of early villages, The people learned to weave the cycles of rain and sun into a calendar of festivals. They learned to shape clay into vessels that carried not just food and drink, but stories and symbols. And they learned to see themselves as part of something larger, a community of families, villages, and emerging centers that together would one day transform the jungles of Mesoamerica into the cradle of one of the ancient world's greatest civilizations. The Preclassic era, birth of kings and cities. In the Preclassic era, between roughly 1000 BCE and 250 CE, the Maya world experienced a profound transformation. Small villages, once scattered across the jungles and highlands, began to grow into larger settlements, places like Nakbe and El Mirador in the northern lowlands of present-day Guatemala. These were not yet the sprawling cities of the Classic period, but they marked the first real flowering of urban life in the Maya heartland. Rising from the forest floor, their massive platforms and stepped pyramids hinted at the grand ambitions of a people learning to organize labor, command resources, and build in stone on a scale never before attempted in the region. At Nakbe, archaeologists have uncovered some of the earliest monumental architecture in the Maya lowlands. Vast basal platforms supporting clusters of temples and plazas suggest coordinated labor by hundreds, perhaps thousands of people. El Mirador, even more striking, emerged by the late Preclassic as the largest Maya center of its time, boasting some of the biggest pyramids in the Americas, including the colossal La Danta complex. These structures were built from millions of cut limestone blocks carried by hand through dense jungle and stacked into towering forms that would dominate the landscape for centuries. These centers did not spring up by chance. Their rise coincided with the emergence of divine kingship, a new political order that blended religious authority with secular power. Where once elders or clan leaders might have guided communal decisions, the rulers of Nakbe, El Mirador, and other Preclassic centers began to claim descent from the gods themselves. Through elaborate public rituals, they presented themselves as intermediaries between earth and sky, conducting ceremonies to ensure rain, fertility, and cosmic order. At El Mirador, evidence of early carved stelae hints at this ideological shift. Though the inscriptions are faint and often eroded, they depict figures wearing elaborate headdresses, holding ceremonial staffs, and standing atop stylized mountain symbols, signs of divine power and sacred legitimacy. These images foreshadow the fully developed royal portraits of the Classic period, where every detail of dress and regalia underscored a ruler's connection to the celestial realm. Alongside divine kingship came the rise of hereditary elites. Powerful families consolidated control over trade networks, specialized craft production, and the allocation of communal labor. In return for organizing construction projects, redistributing goods, and interceding with the gods, these families secured privileges that extended beyond a single lifetime. Their children inherited both status and responsibility, embedding social inequality into the fabric of Maya society. The roots of this inequality can be seen in the very stones of Preclassic, architecture. While commoners lived in thatched homes clustered around agricultural fields, the ruling elite resided in compounds built atop raised platforms, their walls sometimes painted with murals depicting scenes of ritual and power. In Nakbe and El Mirador, archaeologists have uncovered remnants of stucco masks, often more than 3 meters tall, adorning temple facades. These masks, with wide staring eyes and snarling mouths, may have represented gods or ancestral rulers, proclaiming to all who approached the divine sanction of the elite within. The shift from egalitarian village life to stratified urban society was not simply about architecture or ceremony. It was a new way of understanding the world, one where cosmic order depended on human hierarchy, and where the blessings of rain, maize, and fertility flowed through the hands of kings who claimed divine favor. In these centuries, the seeds of Maya civilization took root, the notion that rulers were more than men, that cities were more than clusters of homes, and that the cycles of sun and stars could be harnessed by human will. As Nakbe and El Mirador grew, they drew pilgrims, traders, and farmers from surrounding regions, spreading shared beliefs and practices across the lowlands. By the end of the Preclassic, this experiment in kingship and city building set the stage for an even more spectacular era to come, the Classic period, when Maya civilization would reach its zenith in art, architecture, and cosmic ambition. But in the dark rainforests of the pre-classic world, illuminated by the flickering glow of torchlight on plastered temples, the first kings had already begun to reshape the jungle into a sacred landscape, anchoring their power in stone and their legacy in the hearts of a growing people. As the centuries unfolded between 2000 BCE and 250 CE, the lush lowland jungles and fertile swamps of Mesoamerica saw the rise of something remarkable, the first great ceremonial centers of the ancient Maya. In places like Nakbe and the sprawling city of El Mirador, early Maya architects harnessed communal labor and abundant local resources to build vast platforms of packed earth and limestone. These platforms, often stretching hundreds of meters across, served as foundations for towering pyramids, stepped structures that rose like man-made mountains above the dense green canopy. The swamps that surrounded many of these cities did not deter construction. Instead, they became part of the urban design. The Maya mastered drainage techniques and elevated causeways to ensure their monumental centers stood dry and accessible year-round. Great plazas emerged atop the platforms, where villagers gathered to witness rituals, festivals, and displays of royal power. The pyramids themselves, some over 70 meters high, were often capped with temples dedicated to gods of rain, maize, and the sun, their facades decorated with stucco masks depicting supernatural beings and ancestral rulers. These were not mere buildings. They were statements of authority, testaments to a society's collective effort, and visual representations of the cosmic order the Maya believed bound heaven and earth. Alongside these grand projects, the Maya began to weave together the intellectual threads that would define their civilization for centuries to come. The early pre-classic period witnessed the development of writing, an intricate system of glyphs, combining logograms and phonetic elements. Though the earliest surviving inscriptions are fragmentary, they hint at dynastic lists, calendrical notations, and religious pronouncements. Carved into stelae or painted onto pottery, these symbols represented a growing elite class's attempt to record and legitimize their authority, marking births, deaths, and victories in a medium that transcended human lifespan. Equally important was the refinement of the Maya calendar. Building upon earlier Mesoamerican traditions, the Maya developed systems for tracking time that would eventually include the famed long count, allowing them to record dates extending thousands of years into the past and future. Even in this early era, the Maya displayed a remarkable fluency with celestial observation, marking solstices and equinoxes through the orientation of their pyramids and ceremonial avenues. Their calendar systems did more than guide agricultural cycles. They anchored rituals to cosmic events, ensuring that ceremonies were conducted at moments deemed propitious by priest astronomers studying the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. These innovations were not the work of isolated geniuses, but of communities bound by shared purpose. Laborers carried limestone blocks over long distances. Artisans crafted intricate stucco masks and sculpted glyphs into wet clay. Priests recorded sky patterns on bark paper codices that, though lost to time, once guided the life of entire cities. At El Mirador, causeways extended out like the veins of a living organism, connecting distant settlements to the monumental heart of the polity. Some of these raised roads stretched for miles through swampy terrain, allowing year-round trade, pilgrimages, and the movement of tribute goods like cacao, jade, and obsidian. By the close of the Preclassic era, these developments laid the foundation for the classic Maya civilization to come. Monumental centers with pyramids and plazas became nodes of political power and spiritual authority, while writing and calendar systems offered a framework for dynastic history, agricultural regulation, and cosmic alignment. The rainforests and swamps, far from being barriers, were transformed by human ingenuity into sacred landscapes of stone and ceremony. The Maya had begun their journey from scattered farming villages to builders of pyramids that scraped the sky, setting the stage for a civilization whose echoes still resonate beneath the forest canopy. The classic period begins. City-states and power. Around 250 CE, the ancient Maya world entered what historians and archaeologists call the classic period, a new era marked by the emergence of monumental architecture, flourishing city-states, and complex hierarchies that would define Maya civilization for centuries. Across the dense rainforests and lowland plains of Mesoamerica, communities transformed into urban centers, their skylines dominated by stepped pyramids, towering temples, and intricately carved stelae that proclaimed the power of their rulers. Tikal, located in the lush jungles of modern-day Guatemala, rose to prominence as one of the earliest and most influential Maya cities. Massive pyramidal structures like Temple 1 and Temple 2 pierced the forest canopy, housing tombs of powerful kings and serving as platforms for rituals honoring gods and ancestors. Inscriptions in hieroglyphics recorded royal lineages and victories in battle, preserving the city's history for generations. Tikal's influence radiated outward, bolstered by trade routes that carried jade, obsidian, cacao, and exotic feathers across the region. Meanwhile, to the north, Calakmul emerged as Tikal's formidable rival. Hidden deep within the jungles of the Mexican state of Campeche, Calakmul was home to the Snake Dynasty, a powerful royal house whose kings challenged Tikal's dominance. The two cities became locked in a centuries-long struggle, forming alliances, with smaller polities sending emissaries bearing gifts and launching campaigns to subjugate neighboring regions. Their rivalry shaped the political landscape of the Maya lowlands, with cities like Calakmul, Naranjo, and Dos Pilas caught in the web of shifting allegiances. In the southern reaches of the Maya world, the city of Copan flourished in the fertile valley along the Copan River in present-day Honduras. Known for its elaborate stone carvings and refined sculpture, Copan became a center of artistic and intellectual achievement. Its kings commissioned monuments celebrating dynastic events, celestial cycles, and divine patronage. Copan's famous hieroglyphic stairway, composed of over 2,000 glyphs, remains the longest-known Maya inscription, chronicling the reigns of its rulers in meticulous detail. Farther west, Palenque emerged as another beacon of classic Maya civilization. Nestled at the edge of the Chiapas highlands in Mexico, Palenque's architecture reflected both grandeur and grace, with elegant temples featuring stucco reliefs and roofs crowned by distinctive comb structures. During the reign of King Pakal the Great, the city expanded dramatically, constructing the Temple of the Inscriptions, where Pakal himself would be buried in a sarcophagus, adorned with intricate carvings depicting his journey to the underworld. These city-states were more than clusters of buildings and pyramids. They were centers of ritual, politics, and warfare, where rulers performed blood sacrifices to maintain cosmic order and reinforce their divine right to rule. Courts of nobles and scribes recorded royal conquests, arranged dynastic marriages, and oversaw the collection of tribute from surrounding villages. Markets bustled with traders exchanging obsidian blades, salt, honey, and colorful textiles, linking the urban core to distant provinces. As each city rose in power, monumental construction became a statement of legitimacy and piety. Temples aligned with astronomical phenomena such as solstices and planetary movements, underscored the ruler's role as mediator between the human and divine realms. Priests observed the heavens, interpreted omens, and guided rulers in choosing auspicious dates for battles, coronations, and building projects. The classic period also witnessed the widespread use of the Maya script, a sophisticated system of hieroglyphs combining logograms and syllabic signs. Scribes meticulously inscribed histories onto stone monuments, pottery, and codices made from bark paper, preserving the deeds of kings and the genealogies of royal houses. This explosion of written records provides modern scholars with invaluable glimpses into the political rivalries, alliances, and cosmology that shaped Maya society. By the 5th and 6th centuries CE, these powerful city-states formed a vibrant tapestry of alliances and conflicts across the Maya lowlands. Though each polity sought dominance, they shared a common cultural framework, reverence for ancestors, belief in a universe governed by cycles of time, and the conviction that kingship was a sacred charge bestowed by the gods. This era of monumental ambition and royal power laid the foundations for the Maya civilization's golden age, a time when art, science, and the struggle for supremacy intertwined beneath the canopy of the ancient jungle. As the Maya city-states flourished during the Classic period, their towering pyramids and grand plazas were not merely spaces of ritual and politics. They were canvases upon which the story of the Maya world was meticulously recorded in stone. Across the sprawling jungles of Mesoamerica, rulers and their scribes carved hieroglyphic inscriptions into stelae, altars and temple walls, preserving histories that would endure long after their kingdoms fell silent. These inscriptions chronicled royal lineages stretching back generations, celebrating victories in battle, alliances sealed through marriage, and the divine right of kings to rule as intermediaries between the human realm and the gods. In cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Copan, monuments stood in plazas as both public records and spiritual touchstones. Each glyph, carefully shaped by artisans with stone tools, combined symbolic artistry with precise historical detail. They listed birth dates of rulers, their accession to the throne, the genealogies of their ancestors, and the cosmic events that coincided with important milestones. This intricate script, combining logograms and syllabic elements, remains one of the most sophisticated writing systems of the ancient world, a testament to the Maya mastery of language and record-keeping. The hieroglyphic texts also documented great military campaigns and the subjugation of rival polities. In Copan, for example, the hieroglyphic stairway contains over 2,000 glyphs chronicling the city's dynastic history. Inscriptions at Palenque detail the reign of Pakal the Great, recounting not just his deeds, but connecting them to mythical events and divine ancestors. These records offered both a political tool, asserting legitimacy over rival claims, and a sacred duty, linking human events to the eternal cycles of time tracked by the gods themselves. While scribes etched history onto stone, Maya traders journeyed along vast networks of routes, connecting the highland mountains with the steamy lowland jungles, weaving together a web of commerce that fed the growth of these great cities. Obsidian blades from the volcanic highlands of Guatemala traveled east into the lowlands, prized for their sharpness and ceremonial value. In return, the highlands received cacao beans, used both as currency and in elite feasting rituals, along with colorful feathers from quetzals and other tropical birds, shell ornaments, and salt harvested from coastal flats. These trade routes extended across rivers, mountain passes, and dense forests, linking communities hundreds of miles apart. Canoes carried goods along winding waterways, while porters traversed footpaths through the jungle, bearing bundles of textiles, pottery, and foodstuffs. Marketplaces within city centers buzzed with activity, where traders exchanged news alongside wares, and where nobles acquired prestige goods to display their wealth and cement alliances with neighboring rulers. This flow of goods also brought with it the flow of ideas. Artistic motifs traveled alongside obsidian and jade, influencing sculpture and pottery in distant cities. The depiction of gods, The style of masks and headdresses and the iconography of power reflected both local tradition and regional trends, illustrating a shared cultural dialogue that extended across the Maya realm. The flourishing trade not only enriched the royal courts, but also bound the diverse landscapes of Mesoamerica into a single cultural sphere. Highland maize farmers and lowland cacao growers, coastal salt merchants and inland jade artisans, all were part of a vast system that sustained the political and spiritual heart of the classic Maya world. In the glint of obsidian blades, the bright plumage of ceremonial headdresses, and the enduring glyphs carved into limestone, the Maya city-states left behind a legacy of sophisticated artistry, robust exchange, and historical memory. As we trace the remnants of these inscriptions and the paths once trod by traders, we glimpse a world both vast and interconnected, a civilization that thrived in the thick jungles where stone monuments told stories of kings and gods, and where trade routes pulsed with the lifeblood of an enduring culture, gods, calendars, and cosmic order. Among the towering temples and jungle-shrouded plazas of the Maya world, the movement of the heavens was more than a distant curiosity. It was the very heartbeat of life itself. The Maya believed there, God spoke through the stars, guided the rains, and set the rhythm for planting, harvest, and war. Astronomy was woven into the fabric of daily existence, providing the framework through which priests, rulers, and commoners understood their place in a cosmos alive with divine power. At the center of this celestial devotion was the long count calendar, a system so precise it could chart cycles stretching thousands of years into the past and future. Unlike the cyclical 260-day Tzolk'in calendar and the 365-day Harb solar calendar, the long count tracked linear time, marking great cycles known as baktuns, each lasting roughly 394 solar years. This innovation allowed Maya scribes and priests to record history against a backdrop of cosmic time, placing royal births, battles, and temple dedications within an unbroken chronology stretching back to the mythic creation date, corresponding in our calendar to August 11th, 3114 BCE. The long count system employed a vigesimal base 20 counting structure, using carved glyphs and dot and bar notations to mark days, months, and cycles. Monumental stelae erected in city plazas often included long count dates, linking human achievements to the sacred unfolding of the universe. Such inscriptions did more than commemorate events. They confirmed the ruler's power to act in concert with celestial cycles, aligning earthly order with the heavens. Priests carefully observed the movements of Venus, which the Maya associated with warfare and omens, tracking its appearance as morning and evening star with astonishing accuracy. In cities like Copan and Uxmal, observatories and temple windows were aligned to key solstice and equinox points, allowing priests to measure the sun's progress across the horizon. During these moments, ceremonies honoring solar deities ensured the continued favor of the gods and the prosperity of the kingdom. Eclipses, too, held profound significance. They were seen as times of cosmic disruption, when great serpents devoured the sun or moon. In response, Priests conducted bloodletting rituals, offering their own life force to restore balance and stave off disaster. Their calculations could predict such eclipses with remarkable precision, a testament to centuries of patient observation and the transmission of knowledge through generations of scribes and astronomers. The calendar was not just a tool for priests and kings, it structured the daily rhythms of Maya society. Festivals, planting seasons, tribute collection, and the rotation of labor obligations were scheduled according to sacred calendars, binding communities together under a common cosmic order. In this way, the interplay of astronomy, ritual, and political life was inseparable, ensuring that the human realm remained in harmony with the divine. Through their calendars and their careful watching of the skies, the Maya created a bridge between earth and heaven, crafting a society that honored the gods through time itself. In every carved glyph marking the passage of days, in every temple, aligned with the sun's rising, and in every blood sacrifice offered to Venus at its zenith, the Maya sought not just to observe the universe, but to live as an integral part of its eternal, unfolding order. The Maya world pulsed with an intricate tapestry of deities, each embodying forces of nature, cycles of time, and the ceaseless tides of life and death. Their pantheon was vast, layered, and intimately woven into every corner of existence. From the crackle of a thunderstorm to the measured arc of Venus in the evening sky, the Maya saw the presence of gods who demanded reverence, offerings, and precise ritual observance. Chief among the Maya gods was Itzá, often regarded as a creator figure and lord of the heavens. He was credited with giving humanity writing, the calendar, and the sacred knowledge of medicine and divination. Beside him stood Chichén, goddess of the moon, fertility, childbirth, and weaving, patroness of women whose phases of the moon mirrored the rhythms of life and the tides of time. Then there was Chak, the rain god, whose axe struck the clouds to release rain, nourishing the maize fields that sustained the Maya people. Farmers offered incense, woven cloth, and cacao to Chak, in ceremonies meant to appease his volatile temperament, ensuring the cycle of growth would not be interrupted by drought or flood. Equally revered was Calakmul, god of lightning and royal lineage. Depicted with a serpent leg or wielding an axe, Calakmul was a symbol of dynastic power. His presence in royal inscriptions proclaimed the sacred right of kings to rule, anchoring human authority in the cosmic order. Meanwhile, gods such as Arpuch, lord of death and decay, reminded all that time was cyclical, that every harvest would yield again only after the seeds of sacrifice and rebirth were sown in the earth. Maintaining this delicate balance between humans and the divine fell to the priests, learned keepers of ritual calendars, celestial movements, and arcane knowledge passed from generation to generation. Known by many titles, Aj Kuhun, he of the holy books, or Aj Tzib, scribe, these priests interpreted omens, read glyphic records, and planned ceremonies that synchronized human life with cosmic rhythms. They performed bloodletting rituals, using obsidian blades or stingray spines to draw their own blood as a sacred offering to the gods, a potent act believed to nourish the divine and preserve the flow of life itself. Ceremonies often took place atop towering pyramids at dawn or dusk, moments when the veil between worlds thinned. Priests burned copal incense, filling the air with sweet smoke meant to carry prayers skyward, and offered jade, cacao, or woven textiles into sacred fires. In times of great need, drought, war, or plague, human sacrifice was sometimes deemed necessary, with captured warriors or high-ranking captives given to the gods as emissaries carrying petitions for mercy. These rituals were not acts of random violence, but carefully timed, calculated moments meant to preserve the cosmic order. In the Maya view, gods themselves had sacrificed their own essence to create the world. Thus, human offerings were seen as reciprocal, a repayment of an eternal debt that bound mortals and gods in a cycle of giving and renewal. Through these observances, the priests served as vital intermediaries, reading the heavens and channeling divine will into the human realm. Their ceremonies ensured that the sun rose each morning, that rains returned in season, and that kings ruled by sacred sanction. Their knowledge of celestial cycles guided the planting of maize, the launching of campaigns, and the celebration of royal anniversaries, weaving every act of life into a broader cosmic fabric. In every whispered prayer to Chak before planting, in every blood drop offered beneath the shadow of a pyramid, and in every glyphic inscription praising the gods, the Maya reaffirmed their place in a world sustained by gods both fierce and benevolent. And through the steady hands of their priests, this connection was maintained season after season, generation after generation, a delicate dance with the divine, forever written in the stars above and the stone monuments below. Tikal and Calakmul, rivalry of superpowers. In the dense jungles of the central Maya lowlands, towering pyramids and sprawling plazas bore witness to a centuries-long rivalry that would shape the course of Maya history. Among dozens of city-states vying for supremacy, two giants emerged, Tikal and Calakmul, whose struggle for dominance became the defining saga of the classic period. Their rise was not merely a contest of armies and alliances, but a battle of cosmic legitimacy, royal lineage, and sacred power woven into every stellar, temple, and hieroglyphic inscription. Tikal, situated in what is now northern Guatemala, began to ascend in the 4th century CE, blossoming into a mighty urban center whose influence reached deep into the surrounding jungles. With towering structures like Temple 1 and 2, Tikal's ceremonial core became a hub of political power and ritual spectacle. Royal courts sponsored scribes and artists who recorded dynastic victories on stone monuments, while the city's rulers conducted grand ceremonies atop pyramids rising high above the rainforest canopy. During this period, Tikal's rulers cultivated connections beyond the Maya world. Archaeological evidence, especially rich finds of foreign ceramics, iconography, and burial goods, suggests that Tikal fell under the influence of Teotihuacan, the great metropolis of central Mexico. In the mid-4th century, a figure known in inscriptions as Siajkak, fire is born, arrived at Tikal from Teotihuacan. Some scholars believe he was a general or emissary dispatched by Teotihuacan's rulers, part of a broader expansion of influence into the Maya region. Following Siaj Kark's arrival, Tikal's royal line was reorganized, with new rulers adopting Teotihuacan-style imagery. Warriors wielding the atlatl dart thrower, feathered headdresses, and the talud tablero architectural style typical of Mexico's highland plateau. These changes did not simply reflect foreign conquest. Instead, they represented a calculated fusion of traditions, intended to bolster Tikal's legitimacy by aligning its rulers with the might and prestige of Teotihuacan, the largest and most powerful city in Mesoamerica at the time. Under this new regime, Tikal launched ambitious building programs, expanded its network of vassal towns, and extended trade routes connecting the highlands of Guatemala to the Caribbean coast. Yet Tikal's growing power provoked resistance and competition. To the north, in the swampy heart of the Petén Basin, the city of Calakmul rose as a formidable counterweight. Sometimes called the Kingdom of the Snake, due to its ruling dynasty's emblem glyph featuring a snake head, Calakmul established a rival court culture that matched Tikal's grandeur and ambition. From the 6th century onward, Calakmul forged alliances with dozens of smaller city-states, forming a web of tributaries and loyal vassals that stretched across the lowlands. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul was not merely local, but played out on a stage of interconnected Maya polities. Each side maneuvered through marriages, diplomatic envoys, and, when necessary, open warfare to secure tribute, labor, and symbolic dominance. Hieroglyphic inscriptions recount epic battles, dynastic coups, and moments when each city claimed supremacy over its rival, proclaiming itself the divine center of the Maya world. For the Maya, such struggles were not just political, but cosmic. Victories on the battlefield were interpreted as proof of divine favor, while defeats were seen as signs that rulers had lost the blessing of their gods. The competition spurred an outpouring of monumental construction, as each city sought to demonstrate its glory with new temples, palaces, and stelae, depicting kings communing with ancestors and gods. By the end of the 6th century, Tikal had suffered several setbacks, partly due to the growing power of Calakmul and its network of allies. Yet the rivalry was far from over, and the next centuries would witness both cities locked in a struggle that defined the classic period, leaving behind a legacy of artistry, warfare, and dynastic intrigue that scholars continue to decipher today. Tikal basked in the glow of early triumphs. A potent rival was stirring amid the dense forests of the Petén Basin, Calakmul. By the middle of the 6th century, Calakmul had emerged not merely as another powerful city-state, but as the chief counterweight to Tikal's dominance, forging a network of alliances that would reshape the Maya world. Known by its dynastic emblem, the snakehead glyph, Calakmul's ruling family cultivated an image of cunning power and enduring authority, extending its influence far beyond its towering stone monuments and sprawling plazas. At the heart of Calakmul's strategy lay its ability to bind dozens of smaller city-states into its orbit. Where Tikal once drew tribute and fealty through sheer might, Calakmul mastered the art of diplomatic persuasion, leveraging dynastic marriages, shared rituals, and the promise of mutual defense to cement alliances. Cities such as La Corona, El Peruhuaca, and Caracol pledged loyalty to the Snake Kings, receiving in return royal emblems, trade privileges, and military support against their own local rivals. This web of vassal states extended like a living network through the Maya lowlands, weaving together disparate communities into a confederation whose strength rested on both political negotiation and ritual obligation. This centuries-long conflict between Tikal and Calakmul did not take the form of constant open war, but rather an intricate dance of power marked by periodic confrontations, shifting alliances, and elaborate diplomatic gestures. Inscriptions carved into stone stelae and painted on pottery tell of emissaries dispatched with precious gifts, of royal children married into distant courts, and of rulers travelling under guard to witness ritual bloodletting ceremonies that bound foreign nobles into their sphere of influence. Each act, each gesture, was recorded as a moment of cosmic significance, reinforcing the Snake King's claim to divine favor and regional supremacy. These conflicts also spurred a golden age of monumental architecture and cultural innovation. Both Tikal and Calakmul poured resources into the construction of immense temples and palaces, their facades adorned with carvings depicting victorious kings trampling captives, conversing with deities, or presenting offerings of blood and jade. Each new stela erected in the plazas was not merely a historical record, but a tool of propaganda, declaring to every onlooker that the gods had chosen their city as the true heart of the Maya universe. The rivalry shaped the lives of thousands beyond the royal courts. Commoners were drafted into military expeditions. Artisans labored in workshops producing ceramics bearing the insignia of their rulers, and farmers saw their tribute flows redirected to sustain garrisons and diplomatic missions. Across the centuries, the struggle between Tikal and Calakmul reverberated through trade routes that carried obsidian from the highlands, cacao from the southern plains, and feathers from tropical lowlands, each commodity woven into the tapestry of a competition whose stakes were as much spiritual as material. Archaeological evidence from the Patan region reveals how the landscape itself became a chessboard of alliances and enmities. Fortified outposts guarded mountain passes, while ceremonial centers in secondary cities became hubs for royal councils and gatherings. Glyph texts detail battles fought in remote jungles, decisive ambushes along narrow causeways, and the capture and sacrifice of rival kings, each event punctuating the grand narrative of Maya history with moments of triumph and tragedy. Through it all, the Snake Kings of Calakmul maintained their grip on power by adapting to shifting circumstances, deftly exploiting fractures within Tikal's alliances and projecting an aura of invincibility. Their legacy, carved into stone and etched into the memories of the people they ruled, stands today as testament to the enduring complexity of Maya politics, a world where every alliance was fraught with peril, every festival a show of strength, and every victory a fleeting moment in a contest that would endure for centuries. The Snake Kings and the Golden Age. By the dawn of the 7th century, Calakmul's Snake dynasty, its emblem a stylized serpent head, had become the supreme force in the Maya world. From its capital hidden deep in the Petén jungles, the Snake Kings presided over an age of conquest, diplomacy, and cultural brilliance that would later be recognized as the classic Maya civilization's golden age. Their power extended across hundreds of miles, woven together by a network of vassal cities, puppet rulers, and tribute flows that sustained both courtly opulence and relentless expansion. At the heart of this rise was a careful balancing act of force and persuasion. Calakmul's rulers, known as Kyanul kings, sent emissaries to distant city-states bearing gifts, promises of alliance, and sometimes subtle threats. These diplomatic overtures often culminated in dynastic marriages, binding local royal families to Calakmul's lineage. In other cases, they installed puppet kings, local nobles who owed their thrones and legitimacy directly to the Snake dynasty's backing. Cities like El Perú Huaca, La Corona, and Dos Pilas became vital nodes in this sprawling network, their rulers carefully recording on stelae their allegiance to Calakmul and their participation in wars waged under the Snake banner. This system allowed the Snake Kings to project power without maintaining large standing armies in every corner of their realm. Instead, vassal cities provided troops, laborers, tribute, and, crucially, intelligence about shifting allegiances among neighboring states. When rebellion brewed or rival cities, particularly Tikal, attempted to peel away Calakmul's allies, the Snake Kings responded decisively. Inscriptions tell of raids that destroyed sacred precincts, captured rival kings, and humiliated enemy lineages through ritual sacrifice, each act designed to reinforce Calakmul's role as the epicenter of divine and earthly authority. But the Snake Kings were more than conquerors. They were sophisticated patrons of art, architecture, and religion. Under their aegis, monumental construction blossomed not only in Calakmul itself, but across its sphere of influence. Vassal rulers erected pyramids crowned by towering roof combs, inscribed their names alongside Snake dynasty glyphs, and built ceremonial plazas designed to host festivals celebrating Calakmul's cosmic mandate. These monuments, carved with scenes of enthroned kings, captive enemies, and elaborate offerings to gods, broadcast the dynasty's message of inevitable dominance to every corner of the Maya lowlands. In Calakmul's heartland, the royal court orchestrated grand festivals aligning celestial cycles with political milestones. Priests, astronomers, and scribes collaborated with kings to interpret eclipses, track Venus's journey across the heavens, and mark solstices with bloodletting rituals. Each cosmic sign was inscribed onto stone monuments, justifying further expansion and strengthening the dynasty's claim that the Snake Kings alone mediated between earth and sky. Trade thrived under this regime. Caravans laden with obsidian blades, jade ornaments, cacao beans, and quetzal feathers wound their way through jungles and across rivers, stopping at tambos, way stations, maintained by Calakmul's network of allies. These trade routes reinforced the dynasty's wealth, enabling lavish feasts and the commissioning of elite craftworks. Fine polychrome ceramics, shell inlays, and embroidered textiles used as diplomatic gifts or sacred offerings. Beneath the spectacle of royal power, the Yos, common people labored in fields, quarries, and workshops, their toil sustaining the Snake dynasty's brilliance. Tribute flowed from every corner of the realm, carried on the backs of porters or floated down winding rivers, destined for the grand reservoirs and storehouses that ringed Calakmul's core precincts. In return, vassal rulers received Snake, king envoys bearing the promise of stability, protection, and participation in the rituals that maintained cosmic balance. This golden age was not destined to last forever. Beneath the veneer of stability, rivalries festered, and the cost of maintaining such a vast web of alliances grew. Yet, for more than a century, the Snake Kings embodied the zenith of classic Maya civilization, an age when power flowed from the jungle's hidden heart, wrapped in ritual, shrouded in cosmic symbolism, and carried forth on rivers of blood, jade, and words carved into enduring stone. As the Snake dynasty tightened its grip over the Maya world, the classic period blossomed into an era of extraordinary artistic, architectural, and intellectual achievement. In cities like Calakmul, Tikal, Copan, and dozens of allied centers, the royal courts commissioned immense stelae, towering stone monuments etched with scenes of kings seated on jaguar, thrones, queens draped in feathered regalia, and prisoners bound at their feet. These stelae commemorated victories in war, the forging of dynastic marriages, and the king's role as mediator between the mortal world and divine forces. The art of this era was marked by exquisite detail. Glyphic inscriptions flowed across the monument faces like streams of poetry, recording not just dates and names, but cosmic events, celestial alignments, and sacred rituals that linked royal lineages to the gods. Temples rose higher than ever before, their limestone facades carved, with serpentine motifs, sunburst crowns, and scenes of bloodletting ceremonies meant to nourish the gods and reaffirm divine favor upon the ruling elite. Inside palace walls, painted murals depicted feasting nobles, gift exchanges with distant cities, and processions of priests carrying sacred bundles believed to hold the essence of ancestral spirits. The written word, once used only sparingly, now covered walls, stairways, and ceramic vessels, detailing histories that reached back centuries, intertwining human deeds with mythic creation stories. Scribes and artisans, often trained from childhood in the arcane rules of glyphic grammar and artistic convention, became indispensable members of royal courts. Their work ensured that the triumphs of a king, the marriages that united rival houses, and the blood sacrifices that fed the gods would be remembered long after the rulers themselves turned to dust. Through these monumental records, rulers proclaimed their legitimacy, their connection to divine ancestors, and their right to command tribute and loyalty from vassals near and far. The monuments stood not just as historical markers, but as cosmic beacons, aligning with celestial cycles and reaffirming the sacred order that kings claimed to uphold. And in every carved serpent, every carefully incised glyph, and every towering temple stairway, the classic Maya etched their civilization's brightest moment into stone, a testament to their genius, ambition, and enduring legacy. Collapse in the Lowlands. By the 8th and 9th centuries, The once glittering cities of the southern Maya lowlands, places like Tikal, Copan, Palenque, and Dos Pilas, began to fall silent. Monumental plazas that had echoed with festival, chants, and royal processions became overgrown with vines. Temples where kings once performed bloodletting rites to honor the gods stood abandoned, their carved facades worn by jungle rain and the slow creep of moss. Across the region, populations declined dramatically, and construction of new monuments all but ceased. What caused this unraveling of Maya power remains a puzzle that archaeologists have spent decades trying to piece together, and likely it was not a single cause but a convergence of challenges that strained Maya society to the breaking point. One factor appears to have been escalating warfare. As dynasties fought over tribute routes, farmland, and prestige, conflicts grew more frequent and destructive. Hieroglyphic inscriptions from this period record shifting alliances and bloody battles, with references to captured kings, sacked cities, and raids that left fields and villages burned. This constant warfare may have eroded the stability of kingdoms and undermined the delicate balance of tribute that supported elite classes and the construction of grand architecture. Another strain came from overpopulation and the intensification of agriculture. As cities grew, the surrounding forests were cut for farmland, building material, and fuel. Terraced hillsides and drained swamps were pushed to their limits, reducing the resilience of local ecosystems. Soil fertility declined, and hunting grounds diminished, placing increasing pressure on farmers to produce more maize, squash, and beans for swelling urban populations. In some areas, archaeological studies of pollen and charcoal layers show a dramatic reduction in forest cover during this time, a sign of unsustainable expansion. Climate change compounded these stresses. Paleoclimatic evidence drawn from lake sediments and cave stalagmites across the Maya region points to prolonged periods of drought in the 9th century. Rainfall patterns that had supported consistent harvests and replenished reservoirs shifted dramatically. Fields cracked under the sun's heat, water tables fell, and local rulers found themselves unable to sustain the massive labor drafts needed to build monuments or support armies. Hunger and hardship may have driven people from cities into rural hinterlands, seeking new sources of food and water. As droughts deepened, the authority of divine kings, whose power rested on their ability to mediate with rain gods and maintain cosmic order, was called into question. Inscriptions once filled with triumphal boasts dwindled, their final glyphs often cryptic or incomplete. Stelae record fewer royal events, and some sites show evidence of monuments deliberately defaced, perhaps by rival factions or desperate subjects. Temples fell into disuse, ceremonial calendars frayed, and regional trade networks that had once pulsed with cacao, obsidian, and jade began to break down. This complex mix of warfare, resource exhaustion, population strain, and climate upheaval did not produce a sudden cataclysmic collapse. Rather, it was a process that unfolded over generations. As people gradually left cities, kings lost power, and local traditions shifted from grand ceremonial centers to smaller community shrines. In the highlands and northern Yucatan, new centers of power eventually rose, but the great southern lowland capitals, the heart of classic Maya civilization, would never again reach the same heights. Their abandoned plazas, swallowed by the jungle, stand today as haunting witnesses to a world that once burned brightly with ambition, ritual, and art, before succumbing to the relentless cycles of nature and history. As the 8th and 9th centuries unfolded, the southern Maya lowlands witnessed a quiet exodus. Great cities that had once pulsed with life, filled with chants to the gods, bustling marketplaces, and the steady work of artisans, began to empty. Monumental centers, where kings had overseen ceremonies under the watchful eyes of towering stone stelae, were gradually abandoned. The once immaculate plazas cracked beneath encroaching vines, and pyramids stood alone in the jungle mist, their stepped faces crumbling as trees took root in the masonry. Archaeological surveys show a striking pattern. Construction of new monuments virtually ceased, inscriptions dwindled, and large ceremonial sites fell into disrepair. The carefully planned urban cores, with their grand causeways and processional avenues, became eerily silent. Across the region, farmers, laborers, and artisans packed up and left, heading northward or into smaller rural hamlets where the demands of tribute and labor corvée from struggling kings no longer held sway. This abandonment wasn't sudden. Layers of pottery and construction debris suggest that as harvests failed and warfare escalated, elite classes gradually lost their grip on power. Commoners likely stayed as long as they could, tending fields and hoping for relief from drought and conflict. But with each passing year, fewer people attended royal ceremonies, fewer goods flowed into palace storehouses, and once gleaming plastered temples were left untended. As southern lowland centers emptied, the locus of Maya civilization began to shift northward into the limestone plains of the Yucatan Peninsula. There, new cities like Chichén, Itzá, Uxmal, and later Mayapan rose from forest clearings, gathering refugees, traders, and nobles who brought with them centuries of knowledge in architecture, astronomy, and governance. In the north, conditions were different. The region relied less on rainfall-dependent agriculture thanks to extensive use of cenotes, natural sinkholes that provided year-round water sources. This resilience allowed northern centers to absorb the population flows from the south and grow into vibrant capitals that would dominate the post-classic era. The shift also represented a transformation in Maya politics and society. Whereas southern kings had built their power on divine ancestry and monumental display, demonstrated through massive pyramids, towering stelae, and constant warfare, the northern centers began to forge new models of rule. Chichén Itzá, in particular, adopted collective leadership structures, where councils of elites shared authority, possibly to better manage growing populations and diverse alliances. In the process, old ways of royal commemoration, elaborate, glyphic inscriptions proclaiming dynastic victories, gave way to new architectural forms and murals. These depicted militaristic scenes, feathered warriors, and the merging of local Maya deities with foreign influences from the Mexican highlands, hinting at the cultural synthesis underway. While the jungles swallowed southern capitals, the north flourished, its stepped pyramids and columned halls echoing with the hum of new rituals. In this migration of people, power, and ideas, the Maya civilization demonstrated both vulnerability and resilience, a capacity to adapt in the face of environmental hardship, internal conflict, and shifting cosmological visions. Yet the stone, ghosts of the South remained, quiet monuments to a once great era. For centuries, these abandoned cities lay hidden under thick canopies, their histories waiting to be revealed, their inscriptions silent until future generations return to uncover the story of how the Maya world transformed and endured. The post-classic Maya, Chichén Itzá, and beyond. In the centuries following the decline of the great southern lowland cities, the focus of Maya civilization shifted northward into the broad limestone plains of the Yucatan Peninsula. Between 900 and 1500 CE, this region became the vibrant heart of Maya culture, defined by the rise of powerful northern centers like Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Mayapan. These cities, unlike their predecessors deep in the rainforests, flourished in a landscape dotted with cenotes, natural sinkholes that provided crucial water sources in an otherwise dry environment. Chichén Itzá emerged as the preeminent power. During this period, its monumental core featuring massive stepped pyramids, sprawling plazas, and colonnaded halls. Its most famous structure, the Pyramid of Kukulkan, stands as a testament to the ingenuity and astronomical knowledge of the Maya. On the equinoxes, shadows along its staircase create the illusion of a feathered serpent slithering downward, a powerful symbol of cosmic balance and royal authority. This era also witnessed a profound cultural shift as the northern cities engaged in trade and interaction with peoples from central Mexico. Among these, the Toltecs of Tula played a particularly influential role. Archaeological evidence at Chichén Itzá reveals architectural styles and motifs, feathered serpent columns, warrior reliefs, Calakmul statues that bear striking resemblance to Toltec art and iconography. These connections have led scholars to debate whether the Toltecs invaded the northern Maya lowlands outright, or whether the two cultures merged through sustained contact and alliance building. Regardless of how this influence arrived, its impact was transformative. Chichén Itzá developed into a cosmopolitan center, combining Maya traditions with Toltec militaristic themes. The city's murals and carvings depict rows of warriors, scenes of conquest and sacrifices offered to deities believed to guarantee agricultural fertility and political power. This emphasis on martial prowess marked a departure from earlier classic-era iconography focused on divine kingship and sacred genealogies. Alongside Chichén Itzá, other cities like Uxmal flourished, showcasing distinctive architecture such as the intricate mosaic facades of the nunnery quadrangle and the towering pyramid of the magician. Uxmal became a rival to Chichén Itzá in regional politics, yet it too reflected the broader shifts of the post-classic. Increased emphasis on military alliances, confederations of noble families, and trade that linked the Maya world with other Mesoamerican cultures. By the late post-classic period around the 13th century, Mayapan rose to prominence, establishing itself as the last great capital of the northern Maya. Unlike the centralized rule of earlier kings, Mayapan was governed by a council of noble lineages, reflecting a more collective model of governance, likely forged in response to the volatility of the era. Defensive walls encircled the city, and records suggest frequent political intrigues, factional disputes, and shifting alliances among the ruling families. Trade thrived during this time, with coastal towns like Tulum serving as key ports linking inland centers to Caribbean routes. Goods such as salt, obsidian, cacao, feathers, and cotton moved along well-established trade networks, connecting the Maya to peoples as far as central Mexico and the Gulf Coast. This exchange not only enriched local economies, but also introduced new ideas, gods, and artistic motifs that reshaped Maya religion and ceremony. Throughout the Postclassic, the Maya demonstrated remarkable adaptability. They absorbed foreign influences, experimented with new political systems, and reimagined their relationship with divine power and warfare. Yet even in this age of flux, they maintained continuity with their past. Complex calendrical systems guided planting and festivals, priesthoods upheld sacred rituals, and communities continued to build pyramids aligned to celestial events. In these centuries of transition, the northern Maya cities of Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Mayapan embodied both change and continuity, a final flowering of a civilization whose roots stretched back thousands of years, ever evolving beneath the endless sky. As the Maya world entered the post-classic era, the shifting sands of history brought not just new centers of power, but also fundamental changes in how those centers governed, fought, and engaged with the broader Mesoamerican sphere. Unlike the classic period, where divine kingship rested upon elaborate cosmologies and monumental inscriptions linking rulers to gods, the post-classic saw a marked shift toward overt militarism and more pragmatic forms of political organization. This transformation was particularly evident in cities like Chichén Itzá and later Mayapan. Chichén Itzá's ruling elite projected their power not merely through monumental architecture and celestial alignments, but also by building formidable warrior classes and forging alliances with neighboring cities. Carved reliefs and murals from this period display scenes of warriors carrying spears, shields, and obsidian blades, their ranks parading alongside bound captives and offerings to gods of war and rain. The prominence of these images suggests that rulers of the post-classic era grounded their legitimacy not only in sacred descent, but also in demonstrated military prowess and the ability to protect their subjects in an increasingly volatile world. Accompanying this shift was a reorganization of political systems, where classic-era polities often revolved around dynastic lines tracing their origin to mythic ancestors. Post-classic centers experimented with council rule and confederations of elite families. In Mayapan, for instance, the city was governed by a ruling council composed of powerful noble houses. This arrangement, though often fraught with factional rivalry, provided a degree of collective security and adaptability in a landscape where warfare, tribute demands and shifting alliances were the norm. Walls were built around cities, defensive towers rose over causeways, and rulers crafted pacts with distant cities to ensure steady flows of tribute, warriors, and trade goods. Despite the instability and militarism, the post-classic era was also marked by vibrant economic networks that bound the Maya lowlands to the highlands and coastal routes. Chichén Itzá, perched within easy reach of Caribbean shores, became a nexus for the flow of goods moving from Honduras and Guatemala through Belize and along the Yucatan's coastline. Traders navigated rivers and coastal paths, carrying obsidian blades from the highlands, cacao beans prized by nobles and priests, salt gathered from northern lagoons, and exotic feathers used in elite regalia. These networks extended far beyond Maya territories. Contact with central Mexico, particularly with the Toltec culture, introduced new religious symbols, metallurgical techniques, and luxury goods like turquoise and fine cotton. Some scholars believe that Toltec influence on Chichén Itzá was so profound that it led to an era of shared religious iconography and martial cults that exalted feathered serpents and divine warlords. In the midst of this regional integration, post-classic Maya cities continued to host bustling markets where traders, farmers, and artisans exchanged everyday goods alongside prestige items destined for noble courts. Pottery styles blended local motifs with influences from the Gulf Coast. Metalworking techniques brought small copper bells, pins, and jewelry into elite fashion. Salt, essential for preserving food and conducting certain rituals, became a cornerstone of trade, carried by canoe and on foot along well-established routes. Underpinning this exchange was the resilient Maya knowledge of the land. Terraced farming adapted to thin soils, sophisticated water management using cenotes and reservoirs, and the enduring practice of slash-and-burn cultivation in forest margins. Communities organized seasonal cycles around planting, harvest, and market festivals, guided by calendars that integrated older classic-era systems with new regional variations. This blend of militarism, pragmatic governance, and economic vitality gave post-classic Maya cities a distinctive character. Their rulers held power through the twin pillars of force and commerce, forging alliances with neighbors while guarding against rivals with fortified walls and standing militias. Their priests and astronomers continued to watch the stars, calculating the rhythms of the seasons, while artisans carved stories of conquest, trade, and divine favor into stone and stucco. In the unfolding chapters of the Maya story, the post-classic era stands as a testament to adaptation, an era of challenge, change, and resilience, where the legacy of past glories fueled the ambitions of new powers, and trade routes became the veins through which the pulse of a civilization continued to beat, strong and steady beneath the jungle canopy. Religion, sacrifice, and daily life. Throughout Maya civilization, towering temples and ceremonial plazas stood at the center of daily existence, serving not just as places of worship, but as powerful symbols of political authority and social order. Rising above jungle canopies or standing amid bustling city centers, These temples were often crowned with ornate roof combs and elaborately carved friezes depicting gods, kings, and mythic scenes of creation and destruction. They were, in every sense, the axis mundi of the Maya world, a sacred connection between earth and sky where rulers, priests, and commoners alike gathered to maintain cosmic balance. The Maya viewed their world as animated by divine forces, each aspect of nature, sun, rain, maize, jaguar, serpent, infused with spiritual power. Temples were thus seen as homes for gods, their chambers echoing with the chants of priests and the flicker of incense smoke rising toward painted ceilings. But they were also places where political authority was publicly enacted. Kings ascended temple steps to perform rituals, their actions linking royal legitimacy with the favor of the gods. Ceremonies often coincided with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and Venus cycles, times when the boundary between mortal and divine seemed thinnest. At the heart of many of these ceremonies lay acts of sacrifice, offerings meant to nourish the gods and sustain the ordered cycles of time and nature. The most important of these was bloodletting, a deeply spiritual act carried out by kings, queens, and priests. Using obsidian blades, stingray spines, or sharpened bone needles, elites would draw blood from their tongues, ears, or genitals, offering this vital essence to deities in exchange for blessings on harvests, warfare, or dynastic continuity. Blood, believed to contain the soul's essence, was smeared onto paper strips and burned so that its sacred energy rose with the smoke to the heavens. Human sacrifice also played a role in Maya religious life, particularly during times of crisis, drought, famine, or impending war. Prisoners of conflict, often rival nobles or captured warriors, were the primary victims, their lives given to appease gods associated with rain, fertility, or warfare. In some cases, captives were decapitated, their heads displayed on skull racks as warnings and as offerings to the gods of death and rebirth. Other times, victims were thrown into sacred cenotes, natural sinkholes believed to be portals to the underworld, especially in the northern cities of Chichén, Itzá, where archaeological dives have uncovered human remains alongside precious offerings of jade, gold, and carved bone. These acts, while stark to modern eyes, were woven into the very fabric of Maya cosmology. Life for the Maya was part of an endless cycle of creation and destruction, with the gods themselves having sacrificed their own bodies to create the world. By mirroring this divine act, Maya rulers and priests reaffirmed the covenant between humanity and the supernatural realm, ensuring the continued flow of rain, fertility, and cosmic order. Beyond the dramatic rituals of temple plazas, daily life among the Maya was also deeply infused with religion. Farmers offered the first ears of maize to the gods at small household shrines. Artisans carved images of deities onto incense burners and pottery. Mothers burned copal resin in doorways to protect their children from illness. The cycles of planting and harvest were coordinated through consultation with diviners and the reading of calendars, whose glyphs linked days to gods, omens, and ancestral spirits. Temples, in this sense, were not isolated monuments, but integral parts of the community, their stairways and courtyards serving as stages for dramas that affirmed the rhythms of both earthly and divine worlds. They embodied a worldview in which humans existed not apart from the gods, but as essential participants in sustaining the cosmos through prayer, ritual, and sacrifice, a vision as haunting as it is enduring, echoing even now in the carved stones that rise silent and solemn amid the jungles of Mesoamerica. Beneath the towering temples and elaborately carved stelae, the daily life of the Maya unfolded in a world shaped by social hierarchy, communal ties, and remarkable ingenuity. At the apex of society stood the nobles, or Ajor class, dynastic rulers, priestly lineages, and elite families whose status was often affirmed by descent from gods or mythical ancestors. These nobles governed city-states, commanded armies, oversaw large building projects, and sponsored the elaborate rituals that maintained balance between humans and the divine. Their palaces, built around open courtyards with plastered walls and painted murals, served as both residences and centers of political power, where scribes recorded dynastic history on codices and stone monuments. Below the nobles were skilled artisans, potters, stone carvers, scribes, and painters, who crafted the ceremonial objects that filled temples and royal courts. Some lived within the noble compounds, producing fine polychrome ceramics decorated with hieroglyphs and scenes of myth and history. Others worked in neighborhood workshops, producing goods for local markets. Their artistry, visible in surviving painted vases and carved jade ornaments, reveals a sophisticated aesthetic sensibility and an intimate connection to the spiritual beliefs of their time. Farmers made up the backbone of Maya society, laboring in fields of maize, beans, squash, and chili peppers that stretched along river valleys and across cleared jungle patches. They lived in modest thatched homes clustered around family compounds, organized into extended kin groups called the Calakmul. Farmers maintained terraces on hill slopes to prevent erosion, built stone-lined canals to irrigate fields, and practiced shifting cultivation to renew soils. While their daily tasks were laborious, tending crops, repairing thatch, grinding maize into dough, farmers also played a crucial role in the religious life of their communities, participating in festivals, building communal altars, and helping to erect new temples with labor drafts coordinated by local nobles. At the lowest rung of society were slaves, often prisoners of war or debtors, who worked in household service, construction, or agricultural tasks. While some were destined for sacrifice in ceremonies that sought divine favor, others could, over time, be integrated into the broader community. Their presence was both a reminder of warfare's role in sustaining elite prestige and a testament to the complex, stratified nature of Maya social life. Across this tapestry of social roles, the Maya displayed extraordinary achievements in science and engineering. Their agricultural innovations allowed them to feed large urban populations, even in challenging environments. In swampy lowland areas, they constructed raised fields known as bajos, lifting earth above flood-prone ground to ensure consistent harvest. In hillier regions, stone terraces prevented soil erosion and maximized arable land. Equally impressive were their advances in water management. In cities like Tikal, engineers built large reservoirs lined with plastered clay to collect seasonal rainwater, ensuring a steady supply through dry months. In some places, underground cisterns stored water from sacred cenotes or rivers, while stone-lined canals channeled rainfall into household courtyards and temple precincts. These hydraulic systems not only supported daily life, but also played a role in ritual, with reservoirs often seen as reflections of the watery underworld, Ukak's Kaj in Maya cosmology. Their intellectual prowess extended into mathematics and astronomy. Maya scribes developed a vigesimal base 20 number system that included a concept of zero, a rare innovation in the ancient world. This mathematical sophistication enabled them to track celestial cycles with astonishing precision, aligning temples and observatories with solstice points and Venus phases. They calculated complex calendar cycles, such as the 260-day ritual calendar, the Tzolkin, and the 365-day solar calendar, the Harb, that structured agricultural tasks, religious festivals, and political events. Through these collective efforts of nobles seeking divine favor, artisans shaping images of gods and ancestors, farmers coaxing life from the earth, and mathematicians charting the stars, the Maya built a civilization, both grounded in daily toil and elevated by an enduring vision of cosmic order. Their achievements remind us that greatness is not only measured in stone pyramids and monumental art, but also in the rhythms of planting, counting, and building that sustained life beneath the gaze of the gods. Contact and conquest. The Spanish arrive. In the early years of the 16th century, the world of the Maya, long accustomed to cycles of dynastic struggle, trade, and ritual, faced a force unlike any it had known before. Sailing across the Atlantic in search of riches, new lands, and souls to convert, Spanish expeditions arrived on the shores of the Yucatan Peninsula in the first decades of the 1500s. The first recorded contact occurred in 1511, when a shipwreck stranded a handful of Spaniards on the Yucatan coast. Some of these castaways would later serve as translators and guides for future expeditions, learning the languages and customs of the Maya and providing crucial intelligence to the invaders who would follow. In 1517, Francisco Hernández de Córdoba led the first official Spanish reconnaissance of the Yucatan, landing on its flat palm-lined beaches and encountering fortified Maya towns. His men were driven back by fierce resistance, and the wounded Córdoba carried tales of gold, vast temples, and organized armies back to Cuba. These reports drew more expeditions. In 1518, Juan de Grijalva sailed along the coast, trading cautiously with Maya towns and confirming the wealth of the region. But it was the expedition of Hernán Cortés beginning in 1519 that brought sustained European presence to Mesoamerica, leading to the conquest of the Aztec Empire and fateful incursions into Maya territories. Unlike the rapid collapse of the Aztecs, however, the Maya response to Spanish intrusion was fragmented, local, and fiercely tenacious. Their civilization was not a centralized empire, but a mosaic of independent city-states, each with its own ruler, council, and alliances. This decentralized political landscape, while making unified resistance difficult, also meant that Spanish advances were met with constant local opposition. In the Yucatan, Maya leaders mounted ambushes, poisoned wells, and withdrew into dense forests when threatened, launching counterattacks when Spanish troops were low on supplies. Throughout the 1520s and 1530s, Spanish commanders such as Francisco de Montejo and his son, known as Montejo the Younger, launched repeated attempts to establish footholds in the Yucatan. Their expeditions carved out fragile outposts, only to see them abandoned under waves of Maya resistance. Battles were brutal. Spaniards brought steel swords, firearms, and mounted cavalry, while Maya warriors used obsidian-tipped spears, slings, and guerrilla tactics to harass marching columns and cut off supply lines. Even captured towns proved difficult to hold, as surrounding Maya communities laid siege, refusing to yield their independence to foreign conquerors. The Maya knew their lands intimately: forests, hidden paths, cenotes, and sacred groves, and used this knowledge to evade Spanish patrols and to shelter their families during prolonged campaigns. Some cities negotiated temporary peace or tribute to protect themselves from destruction, only to rise in rebellion once Spanish garrisons were weakened by disease or shortages. This pattern of accommodation, revolt, and counterattack defined nearly 2 centuries of Maya-Spanish conflict, in stark contrast to the swift subjugation of the Aztec heartland further west. By the mid-1500s, a patchwork of Spanish settlements dotted the Yucatan, but true conquest remained elusive. Spanish chroniclers lamented the harsh terrain, the steamy heat that decimated men and horses, and the seemingly endless determination of the Maya to defend their towns and jungles. Across generations, Maya leaders, some adopting Spanish weapons and tactics, others clinging to ancient ways, refused to surrender their lands and their gods, continuing a resistance that would echo into the next century. In this era of first contact and conquest, the Maya world shifted under tremendous strain, but it did not vanish. Villages continued to plant maize and perform rituals to rain gods. Artisans carved new glyphs recording victories and defeats, and in secret groves, priests whispered to the spirits for guidance. The Spanish, though armed with steel and gunpowder, faced an opponent whose resilience, memory, and rootedness in the land could not be extinguished overnight. By the late 17th century, nearly 2 centuries after the first Spanish ships had appeared off the coast of the Yucatan, the last major independent Maya city fell. This was Petén, located on an island in Lake Petén Itzá, in present-day northern Guatemala, a place that had withstood countless Spanish attempts at conquest. For decades, the Itzá Maya of Petén had played a delicate game, occasionally negotiating with Spanish emissaries while fortifying their position, maintaining trade routes, and preparing for inevitable confrontation. Spanish friars and envoys made repeated attempts to convert the Itzá and bring them under colonial control, often meeting with polite hospitality but little genuine concession. But by the 1690s, Spain's colonial apparatus in the Americas was Vast, its governors in Mexico City eager to extinguish the last embers of indigenous independence. In 1697, Martín de Ursúa, governor of Yucatan, launched a well-armed expedition to finally conquer Neuquén. The Spanish assembled boats on the lake's shore and ferried cannons across the water to bombard the island's citadel. After a short but intense siege, they breached the city's defences and overran its palisades. The Itzá ruler, Ajkanek, and his nobles were captured. Temples were desecrated or converted into churches, and the island capital, once a jewel of Maya sovereignty, fell into colonial hands. The capture of Neuquén marked the symbolic end of independent Maya political autonomy. In the centuries before, the Maya world had weathered the collapse of its classic-era lowland cities, the rise of new centers in the north, and the gradual encroachment of Spanish settlements along the coasts and highlands. Yet, despite epidemic, disease, repeated wars, and forced relocations, Maya communities had maintained a degree of autonomy, often withdrawing into remote forests and continuing traditional practices away from Spanish eyes. With Neuquén's fall, the last large-scale indigenous kingdom in Mesoamerica ceased to exist. Spanish authorities consolidated their control over the Petén region, dispatching missionaries to build churches and schools, imposing tribute systems, and recruiting local labor for colonial enterprises. Priests set about eradicating what they saw as pagan rituals, burning codices, and destroying sacred objects. In the decades that followed, the colonial system attempted to reshape Maya society into the mold of Spanish towns, each centered on a plaza dominated by a church and ruled by colonial officials. Yet even as Maya political autonomy ended, their culture, language, and identity endured. In remote villages, families preserved sacred stories and continued cycles of planting, harvest, and communal ceremony. While many adopted the outward trappings of Catholicism, they often blended them with older beliefs, honoring mountain spirits, rain gods, and ancestors beneath the watchful eyes of parish priests. The hieroglyphic tradition, once inscribed in stone and painted in books, evolved into oral histories and prayers whispered in homes and at crossroads. Maya languages, diverse and rich, continued to be spoken across the highlands and lowlands, a testament to resilience despite colonial pressures. Community leaders adapted, negotiating with Spanish officials to protect local lands, preserving collective structures like the Ailu, and using new tools such as Spanish legal petitions to assert old rights. In places like Chiapas and the Guatemalan highlands, Maya peasants carried on weaving techniques, architectural styles, and agricultural practices rooted in centuries of experience. Thus, while the fall of Neuquén and the collapse of Maya political independence marked the end of one chapter, it was not the erasure of a people. Instead, it was the beginning of a new, complicated era of survival and adaptation, in which Maya communities, through language, ritual, and memory, kept alive the pulse of their ancestors beneath the shifting currents of colonial rule. In the markets, fields, and homes of the Maya world, the echoes of ancient cities and fallen kings continued, quietly defying the notion that conquest meant complete conquest of the spirit. Rediscovery and decipherment. In the quiet jungles, of Mesoamerica, where vines wrapped tightly around crumbling stone and howler monkeys called through the misty dawn, the remnants of the ancient Maya lay hidden for centuries. It wasn't until the early 19th century that European explorers and archaeologists, driven by curiosity and the allure of lost civilizations, began to uncover the monumental ruins of the Maya world. Adventurers from Europe and the United States trekked through dense rainforests and marshlands, guided by local Maya who still lived in the shadows of these stone giants. In the 1830s and 1840s, explorers like John Lloyd Stephens and artist Frederick Catherwood journeyed into the Yucatan and Chiapas regions, documenting ruins at Copan, Palenque, Uxmal, and dozens of other sites. Stephens's published journals, accompanied by Catherwood's intricate drawings, captured the imagination of readers across Europe and America. Their books described towering pyramids rising from jungle clearings, vast plazas scattered with fallen stelae, and temples whose walls were covered in mysterious glyphs and fantastical figures. These early reports portrayed the Maya as brilliant builders and peaceful astronomers, creators of a society that worshipped the stars and tracked celestial cycles with extraordinary precision. The precision of Maya calendar systems and their alignment with astronomical phenomena fascinated scholars who marveled at the great stone observatories such as the rounded Caracol at Chichén Itzá that seemed purpose-built for studying the skies. But while European readers admired the ruins and the seeming mathematical genius of the Maya, they often overlooked the complex, layered nature of Maya civilization. Many early archaeologists described them as a gentle, priestly people whose culture mysteriously vanished before the Spanish arrived. Popular theories, shaped by romantic notions of a noble past, downplayed evidence of warfare, sacrifice, and political rivalry recorded on the stone monuments themselves. In those first decades of rediscovery, the Maya became, in the European imagination, a culture frozen in time, their grand cities abandoned, their achievements reduced to mathematical tables and stargazing charts. Few recognized that the descendants of the Maya still lived all around the ruins, speaking their ancestral languages, weaving the same geometric patterns into cloth, and telling stories that echoed the myths carved in temple walls. Meanwhile, the glyphic inscriptions on stelae and lintels remained an unsolved puzzle. Scholars speculated that these elegant symbols represented mere calendrical data or abstract religious ideas, never imagining they recorded the names of kings, dynastic wars, and alliances that spanned centuries. In dusty libraries and smoky salons, European linguists debated the purpose of these hieroglyphs, often dismissing the possibility of a true written language comparable to Egyptian hieroglyphics. Throughout the 19th century, explorers continued to clear brush, map sites, and gather fragments of sculpture and pottery for museum collections in London, Paris, and New York. Expeditions financed by wealthy patrons raced to be the first to photograph temple facades and dig beneath overgrown plazas. In the rush for discovery, many monuments were damaged, sculptures were removed from their original settings, and sacred sites were treated as curiosities rather than the living remnants of an enduring culture. Yet these early endeavors, despite their shortcomings, laid the groundwork for future breakthroughs. The towering pyramids of Tikal, the sprawling ball courts of Copan, and the elegant palaces of Palang began to emerge from the jungle once more, bearing silent witness to a civilization whose story had only begun to be told. In the years to come, scholars would begin the painstaking work of reading the glyphs, correcting the myths of a vanished peaceful people, and revealing the Maya as they truly were: builders of empires, masters of astronomy, and chroniclers of their own complex, often tumultuous history. The rediscovery of the Maya world in the 19th century thus began as a journey into the jungle by foreign explorers armed with sketchpads and curiosity. But it would eventually become a story of listening to voices long silenced, of learning to read the stone texts that spoke of kings, queens, gods, and wars, and of recognizing that the people of the corn never truly vanished, even as their monuments slept beneath the canopy of time. The Maya today, a living legacy. Today, across the hills and valleys of southern Mexico, the highlands of Guatemala, and the forests of Belize and Honduras, the descendants of the ancient Maya continue to live, farm, weave, and celebrate traditions passed down through countless generations. Far from being a vanished people, the Maya number in the millions, making up vibrant communities where old languages echo through market squares, and the pulse of ancestral knowledge beats on beneath the surface of modern life. In rural villages, tucked between mist-covered mountains and rolling maize fields, you can still hear conversations in Quiché, Yucatec, Quechua, and more than 24 other Maya languages. These languages, each shaped by centuries of history, remain living vessels for stories, prayers, agricultural knowledge, and cosmic philosophy. They are spoken in homes, taught in schools, and written into community newspapers that share local news, weather, and cultural updates. In the markets of Chichicastenango and San Cristobal de las Casas, Maya women weave brilliant huipiles, traditional tunics on backstrap looms, their patterns bursting with geometric motifs and symbolic animals that harken back to images carved on temple walls 1,000 years ago. Each design is not merely decoration, but a testament to identity, marking village origins and familial lineages, binding the weaver to her ancestors and community. In fields carved into the mountainsides or stretching across jungle clearings, Maya farmers still plant maize, beans, and squash, the three sisters that sustained their ancestors. They watch the sky, read the shifting winds, and turn to the moon's cycles to guide planting and harvest, blending modern techniques with inherited knowledge of soil, rainfall, and the balance of forest and field. Just as in the time of the kings, agriculture remains central to Maya life, not merely a means of survival, but a spiritual practice rooted in a belief that the earth is alive, generous, and deserving of respect. Ceremony too endures. In small chapels and at forest shrines, Maya priests known as Ajkij light copal incense, scatter offerings of flowers and candles, and speak prayers in their ancestral tongues. These ceremonies honor the mountain spirits, the Apas, and ask for blessings on crops, family health, and community peace. Many celebrations weave together ancient practice and Catholic symbolism, reflecting centuries of cultural adaptation and survival. Every year, festivals bring communities together in color and sound. Dancers dressed as jaguars, parrots, and conquistadors whirl through plazas. Fireworks crackle overhead, and marimba music drifts across fields under the night sky. These gatherings mark solstices, saints' days, and moments in the agricultural calendar, strengthening bonds of kinship and collective memory. In urban centers like Mérida, Quetzaltenango, and Guatemala City, Maya professionals, activists, and artists champion cultural rights, language preservation, and indigenous autonomy. They work in universities, produce films and literature in Maya languages, and organize workshops to teach traditional medicine and weaving to the next generation. Their work carries the legacy of survival into the modern world, ensuring that Maya heritage remains not only alive, but evolving. The path has not been easy. Centuries of conquest, colonialism, civil war, and marginalization have left deep scars. Many Maya communities face poverty, land displacement, and struggles over cultural recognition. Yet, despite these challenges, the Maya endure, their voices rising in classrooms, marketplaces, and the halls of political power. Across the Yucatan and the Guatemalan highlands, along Belizean rivers and Honduran hills, the Maya continue to live as they have for centuries, rooted in land, story, and tradition. Their presence is a reminder that civilizations do not vanish with the fall of kings or the crumbling of stone temples. Instead, they shift, adapt, and carry forward, sustained by the people whose daily lives keep memory alive. In the cadence of their languages, in the warp and weft of every woven thread, in the rich earth that yields maize each season, the Maya today remain a testament to resilience, continuity, and the enduring power of cultural identity. Their story, once thought lost beneath jungle vines, lives on, whispered in the wind, rising in the smoke of incense and walking day by day into the future. Across the Maya homelands, where emerald hills roll into misty jungles and ancient stone cities lie half swallowed by roots and vines, the descendants of those who once built towering pyramids and mapped the heavens face new trials. Today, modern Maya communities continue to carry forward the legacy of their ancestors, even as they grapple with challenges that threaten their lands, livelihoods, and culture. One of the most pressing struggles is the fight for land rights. Throughout Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras, Maya villages often stand on contested territory where government officials, multinational companies, and outside developers lay claim to forests, rivers, and farmland that Maya communities have stewarded for generations. In some areas, hydroelectric dams, mining operations, and commercial plantations displace families, disrupt sacred sites, and pollute waterways essential to both farming and ceremony. Community leaders and elders have repeatedly called for recognition of ancestral land tenure, marching in protest, filing legal cases, and petitioning national governments to honor indigenous titles. Poverty remains widespread among Maya populations, particularly in rural areas. Limited access to healthcare, education, and economic opportunities leaves many families struggling to secure stable incomes and nutrition. Children often walk long distances to school, sometimes studying in classrooms with few books or supplies. Some communities turn to seasonal migration, with men and women seeking work on coastal plantations or in nearby cities, hoping to send earnings home to support their families and build sturdier homes of brick or cinder block. Cultural survival, too, is a daily challenge. While millions of Maya people still speak their languages, pressures from dominant national cultures and globalized media continue to erode transmission to younger generations. In urban centers, youth face discrimination for speaking indigenous languages or wearing traditional clothing, pushing some to hide their heritage in order to find work or social acceptance. Meanwhile, centuries of colonial and state policies have left scars, histories of forced assimilation, religious persecution, and targeted violence that have tried to strip away indigenous identity. Yet despite these hardships, the Maya world remains a wellspring of resilience. Across the highlands and lowlands, communities are organizing language schools, weaving cooperatives, and herbal medicine workshops to pass on ancestral knowledge. Youth leaders are learning the old ways of reading the skies and planting according to lunar cycles, combining ancient wisdom with new science to improve soil health and crop yields. Beyond the Maya homelands, the world has developed a deep fascination with this ancient civilization. In films, documentaries, and historical fiction, Maya ruins, myths, and glyphs serve as backdrops for tales of mystery, adventure, and cosmic wonder. Hollywood has turned Maya imagery into grand spectacles, while books and video games draw from their pantheon of gods and heroes to craft new stories. Though often simplified or distorted in popular media, these portrayals have also sparked curiosity that leads tourists, scholars, and amateur historians to learn more. Tourism itself has become a double-edged sword. On one hand, visitors to places like Tikal, Copan, and Chichén Itzá bring revenue that supports local guides, artisans, and community development projects. On the other, over-tourism threatens delicate ruins, increases waste in fragile ecosystems, and sometimes funnels profits into outside corporations rather than local hands. Maya leaders and preservationists work to balance these pressures, developing community-led tourism initiatives that foreground respect for the sites, their spiritual significance, and the people who continue to call the surrounding land home. In more universities across the globe, Maya studies flourish as a serious field of research. Scholars collaborate with Maya communities to decipher glyphic texts, map ancient trade routes, and preserve oral histories. New archaeological discoveries reveal forgotten cities buried in the jungle canopy, while advances in remote sensing and digital imaging allow historians to trace the expansion and collapse of dynasties across centuries. Many researchers now recognize that to truly understand Maya civilization, past and present, they must listen to Maya voices and center indigenous perspectives in their work. Thus, the story of the Maya is not just etched into crumbling stone stelae or hidden in rainforest temples. It continues in the daily life of millions, in the rhythm of weaving looms, in the cadence of prayers offered before sunrise, in the quiet struggle for justice over land and water, and in the defiant pride of young Maya poets, artists and farmers who carry forward a culture that has endured the rise and fall of kingdoms, the coming of conquerors, and the gaze of the modern world.